There are plenty of picturesque places in the world, but just as there's beauty, there's also terrifying and scary. This list of places are not typical vacation destinations by any stretch, and are sure to haunt anyone who visits them. These are the 5 most scary and creepy places on Earth. Number 5. Paris Catacombs. Hailed as the City of Lights, Paris is known the world over for its romantic allure and beautiful sights. But there's something underneath all that charm, something unlike anything else in the world that will send chills down your spine, and that's the existence of the Paris Catacombs. Even before the city came to be, Parisian underground mines and quarries were widespread. These mines were built haphazardly and were once used to quarry limestone for constructing buildings, as well as gypsum used in plaster of Paris. Ever since its discovery, the mines have been found to have 3 large networks that run underground in several districts. After quarrying and mining stopped, the people began building the city on top of these existing mines, and they were left undisturbed, nearly forgotten until the late 18th century. By this time, the people of Paris had one massive cemetery problem. Because there was no urban planning when it was first created, Paris began with building their cemetery right in the middle of it. However, as the dead piled up, their graves began overflowing, and the smell of rotting corpses invaded the air. Perfume sellers even complained they couldn't sell their products because the stench overpowered them. By 1763, Louis XV banned added burials within the city, and the church pushed back and wouldn't allow any of the bodies to be disturbed or moved. It took an act of God to finally push them into action. Prolonged heavy rains caused a wall of the cemetery to collapse and washed out hundreds of corpses onto the streets, and it was then that they finally decided to place the dead inside the abandoned tunnels. People started moving the bodies into the catacombs in 1786. The remains were often grouped in a specific area according to the cemeteries they were taken from, and after 12 years, all the city's cemeteries were emptied and fully moved into the mines. Today, over a mile of the catacombs are dedicated as an ossuary, housing more than 6 million bodies inside, which is more than the number of people in Paris. As visitors enter, they are greeted with an inscription on the doorway that translates to, "Stop, this is the Empire of Death." Much of the catacombs have been mapped out, but so many still aren't. Cataphiles, who are people who explore the underground tunnels for fun, have sworn that at least one concert was held there in 1817. And finally, there's the legend of Philbert Aspart, who got lost inside in 1793. It was said that he wandered around unable to find a way out. When his body was found 11 years later, it was discovered close to an exit, but unfortunately, he never found it. Number 4. Snake Island. If you're deathly afraid of snakes, there's one island you should stay away from. Ilha Grande, otherwise known as Snake Island. Located off the coast of Brazil, Snake Island was cut off from the mainland by rising sea levels during the last ice age. This place is mostly covered in a thick rainforest and open grasslands. The island was once inhabited by people. Those who occupied it attempted to create a banana plantation and used the slash and burn technique to clear out a portion of land for planting. This garnered it the name Queimada, which means slash and burn in Portuguese. However, it was fully abandoned by the 1920s. What makes Snake Island so scary and deadly are its inhabitants now. It's estimated that there's 1 to 5 snakes for every 3 square feet of land. While non-venomous snakes are also here, its prominent resident is the vicious golden lancehead viper. They are considered to be one of the most venomous snakes in the world. Compared to other ones in their genus, they've developed venom that's 5 times more deadly and can easily kill small prey in an instant. Golden lanceheads are considered critically endangered, and Snake Island is the only place in the world where they are known to exist. They can grow up to 1.5 feet, and their poison has the capacity to melt the flesh around a bite wound, causing massive bleeding and then death. Because of the number of snakes, only the Brazilian Navy and certain people from the scientific community are allowed to enter Snake Island once every year. Of course, there are reports that poachers have tried to go there as well. Their goal? To capture the deadly golden lance heads because of their rarity and venom. It's estimated these snakes can fetch prices as high as $30,000 a piece on the black market. As for deaths in this snake-infested land, there are two main stories that are frequently reported by locals. The first is of a fisherman who suffered engine trouble with his boat. He unknowingly got off on the island and explored it looking for bananas. He was most likely bitten and ran back to his boat, where his body was eventually found in a pool of his own blood. The second story is about the family of the last lighthouse keeper. Apparently one night snakes entered their windows and sent the family members scurrying to their boat in fear. As they headed back to the dock, snakes hanging from the tree branches overhead bit them, and all of them suffered a horribly painful death. Number 3. Island of the Dolls. Considered a haunted island, the Island of the Dolls can be reached in a 2-hour canal drive from Mexico City. An actual floating garden, the island amps up the creepy factor with the hundreds of dolls and doll parts decorating the trees in various areas of the island. According to legend, La Isla de la Muñeca came to be because of one man, a local named Don Julian Barrera. A hermit, he lived on one of the small islands inside the canal system, and one day he came across a little girl that had drowned under mysterious circumstances. She was never identified, and shortly afterwards Barrera discovered a doll floating nearby. He thought it likely belonged to her, so in hopes of appeasing her spirit and helping her move along into the afterlife, he hung the doll on a tree. But this didn't seem to help. Soon Barrera said he could hear the anguish and terrifying screams of a girl, and on occasion, he could even hear the dolls talking themselves. So he began his crusade of putting up more dolls in the trees in hopes of pacifying whatever it was that was tormenting him. He collected dolls from the garbage and canals. He would dress them up or simply tie them using wire and hung them on the trees and branches. Some were intact, others mutilated and dismembered. Barrera was welcoming of guests who were curious about his unusual hobby. In 2001, he was found dead, floating in the same canal system where he said he found the little girl years earlier. Some say he suffered a heart attack and died by the water, while others say some unknown force, perhaps even the spirit of the little girl, drove him to his death. Today, there are over 1,500 dolls hanging all around. Most of these were the ones Barrera had put up himself, and they've been left untouched for many years. Number 2. Capuchin Catacombs of Palermo. Mummies aren't just found in Egypt, they're also found on the beautiful island of Sicily. The city of Capuchin is located on the outskirts of Palermo. In it is found the famously creepy Capuchin Monastery. During the 16th century, this monastery ran out of space for their cemetery and decided to excavate beneath the church. It's there they created various crypts, which were originally designed to host the mummified bodies of dead monks. The first monk mummified and placed underneath here was Silvestro of Gubbio in 1599, while the last monk interred was Brother Ricardo in 1871. Later on, wealthy and prominent families had their relatives mummified and displayed inside the tombs as well, providing payment and donation to the monastery for this opportunity. The mummified bodies were well maintained and displayed for everyone to see. If the donation or payment was late, then it was removed from viewing and would only be placed back up again if payments resumed. One of the last bodies interred in the catacombs was in the 1920s. It was that of a 2-year-old girl by the name of Rosalia Lombardo. The body is so well maintained that she's been nicknamed Sleeping Beauty. For years, the techniques of preservation was a secret, and it wasn't until recently that historians figured out the process. Turns out the bodies were maintained using a combination of various chemicals including glycerin, formalin, zinc salts, and an alcohol solution that included salicylic acid. Today, the Capuchin catacombs host over 8,000 bodies and more than 1,200 of them are mummified. These corpses line the walls and are divided into various categories. Visitors can find sections for men, women, children, priests, monks, virgins, and professionals. There are bodies that are better preserved compared to others, and for a long time the families were allowed access to the crypts and the mummies in order to change their clothes and keep them presentable. Number 1. Beelitz-Heilsatten Hospital, Beelitz, Germany. Built in the later part of the 18th century, the Beelitz-Heilsatten Hospital, otherwise known as the Beelitz Sanatorium, was initially created to help rehabilitate tuberculosis patients. It was built from 1898 to 1930 under the direction of the German National Insurance Institute. They thought that the proximity of the area to the capital as well as the fresh countryside air would make the perfect location to help patients. It was built with 60 buildings consisting mostly of treatment facilities, but there was also a small village in the area along with a bakery, restaurant, butcher's post, a post office, and even a power station. By August 13, 1914, the First World War broke out, and the Red Cross overtook the hospital, and the beds were made available for the more than 12,000 patients that came in injured or wounded. This included a young Adolf Hitler who stayed for 2 months after he suffered a thigh injury from a grenade exploding near him in the Battle of Somme. Even though a lot of the wards were closed due to the economic conditions of the war, the facilities at the sanatorium were considered some of the best places to receive treatment at the time. By 1945, the Red Army took it over, again converting it into a military hospital tending to the wounded soldiers. This became the largest Soviet military hospital apart from the USSR, and it remained as such until 1995. Afterwards, it was taken over by private investors, who failed in attempting to rehabilitate the buildings. In most recent times, it's been the site of several murders, including that of a 20-year-old model, Anya, who was beaten to death with a frying pan, then strangled during an apparent sex fetish photo shoot. Over the years, the buildings have been left derelict, giving it the feel of a ghost town. It has been used to shoot various films and music videos, including 2002's The Pianist. Today, many of the buildings are in rapid decay. Talks of restoring parts are ongoing, but nothing on a wider scale. There are tour groups that operate in the area for people who like the thought of exploring and seeing the infamous and scary hospital. It's definitely a creepy looking place, one you wouldn't want to tour after dark, especially if you were alone. So those were the 5 most scary and creepy places on Earth. From abandoned hospitals to underground crypts, these frightening places still exist today. As humans, we are naturally curious and like the thrill of exploring scary places, and most likely there are many more out there we've yet to discover. If you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up and click the notification bell so each week we can bring you a new scary video to check out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.